My parents thought my empty apartment was their new home. I waited until they moved in to sell it. It started not with a shout, but with a whisper I was never meant to hear. A secret traded in the humid, overcooked air of my childhood kitchen, beneath the relentless percussion of Seattle rain against the windowpane. I stood frozen on the worn welcome mat, my hand fused to the icy brass of the door handle, a stranger on the threshold of the house that built me. The voices inside weren't planning a visit or asking a favor. They were conducting a quiet, ruthless coup. My high-rise condo, my glass and steel sanctuary earned through a decade of 90-hour weeks in forensic accounting, wasn't my refuge anymore. In their minds, it was already vacant territory, a resource to be seamlessly absorbed. They saw a 3-month international assignment as my vulnerability. I heard it as the catalyst for my final audit. That night, I didn't confront them. I smiled. I agreed. And I began the most calculated transaction of my life. The moment I pushed that heavy oak door open, the conspiracy evaporated into a cloud of forced holiday cheer. "Elara! Sweetheart, you're early." My mother, Susan, descended on me, her embrace a brittle performance of warmth that didn't reach her eyes. The air was thick with the scent of pot roast and damp wool, a suffocating aroma that clung to the back of my throat, a stark contrast to the clean, cedar-filtered air of my own space. My father, Richard, stood by the dining table, a general caught surveying a map of enemy territory. His smile was a tight, practiced line. "Good to see you. The traffic must have been a nightmare." I offered my own scripted lines, my face a placid mask. I accepted a glass of cheap red wine in a chipped holiday mug and took the seat they indicated, the hard wooden chair at the room's periphery, leaving the plush sofa for the core family unit. My sister Chloe, swaddled in blankets with a hand resting on the subtle curve of her belly, and her husband Derek, who leaned back with a proprietary air, as if he were already surveying his new domain. As my mother fussed over Chloe's pillows and my father launched into a toast to family, my mind detached. The room became a data set. I was no longer a daughter in her parents' home. I was a forensic accountant conducting a live audit. Every glance, every weighted pause, every syrupy term of endearment was entered into a mental ledger that had been silently accruing entries for 15 years. I saw the ghost of Derek's failed tech startup flicker in the corner, a $25,000 entry I'd coded as a family investment that had vanished into a leased sports car and expensive lunches. I saw the shadow of my father's unexpected pension shortfall, an $8,000 withdrawal that had coincidentally funded a Caribbean cruise months later. I saw the steady, draining line item of Chloe's health management, a bottomless pit of copays and premium supplements for ailments that never seemed to have a diagnosable name. Their play unfolded over dessert. My father cleared his throat, adopting the grave tone of a man discussing a noble sacrifice. "With the baby coming, and Chloe's delicate condition, the stairs here are becoming a real concern. Your mother's knees, you know." He painted a picture of mild inconvenience. My mother, Susan, picked up the thread, her voice a masterclass in manipulative concern. "And you'll be all the way in Seoul for 3 whole months. That beautiful condo of yours, just sitting empty. It seems so wasteful, darling. We were thinking, we could house sit. Keep the plants alive. Really look after the place for you." Chloe sniffled delicately, her eyes wide and glistening. "The light in those loft windows would be so calming for the baby, Elara. It would just be temporary. Just until we get back on our feet." Derek nodded, adding with a smirk, "We'd take great care of it. Maybe even add some value." The audacity was breathtaking in its simplicity. They weren't asking. They were presenting a fait accompli wrapped in the guise of a favor. They were banking on a lifetime of conditioning, on my ingrained role as the capable one, the solver, the silent underwriter of their comfort. In that moment, the final calculation completed. The sum total of their entitlement had finally exceeded their value to my life. The emotional investment was a sunk cost. I looked at their expectant faces, glowing with the certainty of their victory, and I made my decision. I set my wine glass down with a soft, Definitive click. I let a warm, agreeable smile soften my features, the perfect mirror of their own deceptions. Of course, I said, my voice a soothing balm. It's the perfect solution. The building has a fantastic gym and a concierge. It would be ideal. The key will be under the mat on the first. The relief and triumph that flooded the room was palpable. They had won. Or so they believed. The audit was closed. The liquidation was about to begin. The persona I wore in that damp living room, the agreeable, dutiful Alara, shed like a second skin the moment my car door shut outside their house. The cold, rainy air was no longer oppressive, it was clarifying. Driving back to my condo in the city's glittering heart, I wasn't planning a defense. I was orchestrating an offensive. My sanctuary had been designated a hostile asset, and my family had identified themselves as the liability. My 3-month assignment to Seoul wasn't a vulnerability, it was the perfect alibi and an immovable deadline. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in strategic asset stripping. I didn't pack with sentiment, I cataloged with cold utility. My true valuables, the proprietary server holding my client work, the original art collected from emerging local artists, the hand-restored mid-century furniture, the bespoke rugs, were meticulously crated and moved not to a storage unit, but to a high-security, climate-controlled art vault registered to an anonymous LLC. The condo needed to be stripped of anything that held real value, monetary or emotional. What remained was to be a shell, a stage set for their impending disillusionment. With the bones of my home exposed, I began the staging. I drove to the furthest thrift outlet in the city, where furniture was sold by the pound. I selected with a perverse, artistic eye. A sagging velvet sofa that emitted a faint, mildewed odor. A dining table with one irreparably wobbly leg. Lamps with frayed cords and intermittent flickers. I hired movers to bring these items in, creating a depressing parody of a lived-in space. I placed the lumpy sofa directly where Derek would undoubtedly envision his massive new television. I arranged the wobbly table in the dining nook. It was a physical manifestation of the relationship they offered, superficially functional, but fundamentally unsound and corrosive to the foundation. The final, crucial props were the boxes. In the walk-in closet of the master bedroom, the room I knew Chloe had already mentally decorated as her nursery, I placed 4 large, elegant gift boxes. I wrapped them in luxurious, shimmery paper and tied them with elaborate bows. Affixed to each was a crisp, calligraph tag: Mom, Dad, Chloe, Derek. They would discover these, I knew. They would tear into them with the greedy excitement of children on Christmas morning, expecting some final, generous tribute from their compliant benefactor. They would find their true inheritance. Inside my father's box, every paid receipt for his union dues and medical supplements I had covered for 5 years, along with a certified letter from the billing department stating all future payments were his responsibility, effective immediately. For my mother, the complete statements for the high-limit department store credit card she treated as a personal line of credit, with a highlighted total and the customer service number for the collections agency now handling the debt. Derek's box contained the fully executed loan documents for his defunct crypto venture, which I had not forgiven but had merely been servicing, along with a notice of transfer of debt back to him as the primary signatory. And for Chloe, the most delicate, the official cancellation notices for her gold-tier health insurance and her monthly prenatal subscription services, along with a list of state-funded clinics. I wasn't just evicting them from a property. I was foreclosing on the entire invisible financial infrastructure I had built beneath their lives. I was recalling every single line of credit. On the morning of my flight, I performed the last act. I placed a single sheet of my personal stationery on the cheap, scratched kitchen counter. It read, "Make yourselves at home. You've earned everything inside." I slid the single key under the welcome mat. Then I walked out, my carry-on roller echoing in the empty, staged space. I didn't look back. The host was departing. The parasites were moving into a beautifully wrapped trap. As my plane lifted off through the heavy clouds, my phone vibrated. A photo from Chloe lit up the screen, a selfie of her and Derek, grinning wildly in the middle of the barren, ugly living room. The text read, "We're home." I deleted the notification, powered down my phone, and ordered a champagne. The first phase was complete. From 30,000 feet, and later from my corporate apartment in Seoul, I monitored the situation not with anxiety, but with the detached focus of a scientist observing a controlled experiment. My security system, which they had no idea I'd left active, fed silent, high-definition footage to a secure portal. I watched their first night. I saw Derek pop a beer and put his feet up on the stained velvet sofa, already complaining about the lack of a proper sound system. I saw Chloe waddle through the rooms, her face pinched with distaste as she ran a finger over the dusty thrift store furnishings. I heard my mother's voice, tinny through the audio feed, saying, "We'll just have to replace it all. She must have taken the good things." So selfish, really. They were dissatisfied guests in a museum of their own entitlement, utterly blind to the fact they were exhibits in my case study of consequence. The demolition was scheduled for 10 a.m. on their third day. I had sold the condo, not to a traditional buyer, but to a development firm known for rapid, aggressive conversions. The CEO was an old contact who appreciated cold, clean deals and asked no sentimental questions. The price was under market for a swift, all-cash close with one condition. The gut renovation began the moment the previous occupants were removed. I supplied the security codes and a waiver. At 9:58 a.m. Seoul time, I poured a coffee and opened the live feed. The scene was one of domestic torpor. Chloe was on the lumpy sofa, scrolling her phone. Derek was in my study, already using my old desk as a footrest. My parents were arguing softly in the kitchen about the faulty coffee maker. At 10 o'clock exactly, a firm, heavy knock shook the front door. Derek heaved himself up with a grumble. "Probably a neighbor already complaining," he muttered, swinging the door open. He did not find a neighbor. He found Marcus, the head of site security for Apex Development, flanked by 2 assistants and, behind them, a crew of 6 men in work boots and hard hats carrying sledgehammers and crowbars. The audio captured everything. "Can I help you?" Derek asked, his voice laced with false authority. "This is a private residence." "This is an active construction site," Marcus replied, his voice flat and devoid of negotiable tone. He held up a tablet. The property was sold by a Lara Vance to Apex Development Holdings on the 26th. "We have legal possession. You are trespassing. You have 5 minutes to remove yourselves and any personal belongings before demolition commences." The silence on the feed was absolute for 3 full seconds. Then, chaos. "That's impossible," my father's voice boomed as he shoved past Derek. "My daughter owns this condo. We have her permission to be here. We're family." He was waving his arms, his face flushing a dangerous purple. Marcus didn't flinch. "Your daughter sold it. The deed is recorded. You have no lease, no tenancy agreement. You are squatters. The police have been notified and are en route to ensure you vacate." It was then that Chloe, in a panic, ran to the bedroom closet, perhaps thinking to pack, and found the beautifully wrapped boxes. "Look, she left us gifts. See? She knew we were here." Her voice was a shrill lifeline. In their unraveling state, they seized on it. They gathered in the living room, tearing at the expensive paper like frantic children. The moment the first piece of paper fluttered to the floor, the demolition foreman gave a nod. The first sledgehammer swung into the drywall
my
of
family
the
no
non-load-bearing
longer heard
kitchen
it.
wall with
They
a
were
sickening,
staring at
dusty
the contents
crunch of their boxes. My father's hands shook as he held the loan transfer documents. My mother let out a small, strangled cry reading the credit card statement total. Derek's face went ashen, the loan papers for his failed venture fluttering from his grip. Chloe sank to the floor, the insurance cancellation notice pressed against her baby bump, her mouth a perfect, silent O of horror. The financial floor had not just vanished from beneath them, it had been actively pulled away. The soundtrack to their realization was the relentless, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of sledgehammers reducing their ill-gotten haven to rubble and dust around them. The police arrived, spoke briefly with Marcus, and escorted my shell-shocked family from the premises. The last image from the feed was my mother, not looking back at the condo, but clutching the decorated box of her debts to her chest as if it were a dying child, being led out into the rain. In the ensuing radio silence, I found a profound and unsettling peace. Seoul was a cascade of orderly energy, a city that functioned on mutual, understood contracts. The silence for my family was not an empty void. It was a space I filled with a quiet hum of my own purpose. I extended my assignment, then took a sabbatical. I rented a hanok, a traditional wooden house in a quiet Seoul neighborhood, its structure strong precisely because of its flexible joints, its ability to withstand pressure without breaking. The irony was not lost on me. I was learning the art of resilience from architecture. Months bled into a new year. The legal and financial fallout for them unfolded predictably, relayed to me in dry, factual emails from my attorney. The debts, now squarely in their names, went to collections. Wage garnishments began. The eviction from my condo, recorded and uploaded anonymously to a neighborhood watch site, had shredded their social standing. They became a cautionary tale whispered about at church and the country club. Derek's mother, discovering her son had co-signed a debt in her name, evicted them from her basement. They ping-ponged between extended-stay motels off the interstate, a nomadic, shamed unit. I ensured only one thread of grace was woven into this tapestry of consequence. Through my attorney, I established irrevocable educational trusts for my 2 young nephews. The funds would be accessible only to them for tuition and living expenses upon turning 18, managed by a dispassionate third-party trustee. Their parents would have no knowledge of the accounts and no access to them. The innocent would have a bridge to a future their parents could not provide, or plunder. Then, 6 months to the day after the demolition, the letter arrived. It was forwarded from my old address, the paper itself seeming weary from its long journey. Chloe's handwriting, once bubbly and expansive, was a cramped, desperate scrawl that bled through the envelope. I took it to the inner courtyard of my hanok, where a single maple tree was beginning to turn, and I read it under the soft, diffused light. Ilara, Mom says we're not supposed to write. Dad says you're dead to him. Derek calls you a sociopath. But I need you to know what you did. We're living in a motel where the walls smell of smoke and the boys cry because the people next door fight all night. Mom works checkout at a grocery store now. Her feet are swollen every night. Dad's pension is being eaten by the back taxes you stopped paying. Everyone knows. Everyone saw the video. We can't show our faces anywhere. I tried to use the insurance for the baby, and they laughed at me. Laughed. I had to go to a clinic with fluorescent lights and a line out the door. You took everything. You didn't just take a roof. You took the ground. I'm not asking for money. I know you won't give it. I just need you to know that you won. You destroyed your family. Are you happy now? Are you finally happy? I read it once. Then I read it again, slowly, dissecting each sentence not for emotion, but for data points. The data confirmed the success of the operation. Liabilities severed, dependencies cut, hostile elements neutralized. The question, are you happy? Hovered in the air. I searched for the feeling. I searched for guilt, for schadenfreude, for vindication. I found none of them. What I found was quieter, more absolute. It was the absence of a weight I had carried for so long I'd mistaken it for a part of my skeleton. It was the silence after a constant, debilitating noise has ceased. It wasn't happiness. It was neutrality. It was freedom. I felt no urge to reply, to explain, to justify. Any response would be a form of re-engagement, a reopening of an account I had permanently closed. The letter was their final invoice, and in their minds, it was a bill I owed. In mine, it was a notification that a debt had been settled in full. I placed the letter on the low wooden table. I watched a single late-season maple leaf, read as a warning, detach and spiral down to land upon it. Then I picked up both leaf and letter, walked to the recycling bin, and let them go. The job of being their daughter, their bank, their safety net, that position had been terminated. I was no longer accepting applications. The final lesson, the one that took root in the fertile silence after the letter, was about sovereignty. My sanctuary was never the condo with its glass walls and restored brick. Those were just walls. A sanctuary isn't a place you own, it's a state you protect. It's the inviolable space within yourself where your values, your peace, and your resources are yours to command. They didn't just want my apartment, they sought to occupy that internal space, to dictate its terms. By taking the physical thing, they showed me it was always expendable. The real sanctuary was my autonomy, and that, I fortified. I never returned to that city, or to that life. The forensic accounting firm offered me a partnership track. I declined and shifted my practice remotely, consulting for clients who valued clear contracts and defined boundaries. I invested not in property, but in experiences and skills, language lessons, martial arts, pottery. I built a life where my worth was not stored in assets others could covet, but in a serenity they could not disturb. Occasionally, I would think of them, not with malice or longing, but as a mathematician might regard a failed but instructive equation. They were a proof of concept, a demonstration that some systems are too corrupted to save and must be shut down entirely. The love I had for them, or the idea of them, didn't vanish, it was reallocated. It went into the careful work I did, into the quiet friendships I nurtured with people who asked for nothing but companionship, and into the silent promise I kept to those two boys whose futures were now, securely, their own. Their present was the sum of every choice they made, to take, to manipulate, to assume entitlement over another person's life. They had planted those seeds long before that rainy night on my porch. I merely refused to water the garden any longer. I let it return to the wild state they had cultivated. And in that wild, untamed space of consequence, I finally found my peace. It was not a triumphant peace. It was a sober, hard-won peace, built on the unshakable foundation of a simple truth. You cannot be exploited without your own consent. I had finally, permanently revoked mine. This story resonated with you. If you've ever felt the weight of an obligation that was never yours to carry, or heard the quiet click of a lock finally turning in your own mind, then you understand that silence at the end. That space isn't empty. It's full of potential. It's the ground where you start building something truly your own. I share this not as a blueprint for revenge, but as a testament to the power of a calculated reset. Sometimes, protecting your peace is the most radical act of self-preservation you can undertake. It's about auditing the ledgers of your own life and having the courage to close the accounts that are draining you. Here at Winds of Thought, we explore these difficult resets. We navigate the storms of family expectation, societal pressure, and personal betrayal to find that still, clear point of direction within. If you're searching for that clarity, you're not alone. This channel is a community for those who are done just weathering the storm and are ready to learn how to chart their own course. Your engagement is what allows this channel to grow. So if this video landed with you, please like it right now. It tells the algorithm this is the kind of substantive, narrative-driven content you want more of. And most importantly, subscribe to Winds of Thought. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our weekly deep dives into the stories and strategies that help us navigate life's most complex emotional landscapes. Your support builds this sanctuary of ideas. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one non-negotiable boundary you've had to set to protect your own peace? Share your story. Let's continue this conversation and this journey together.